Welcome to Behind the Play, a video and podcast product of The Hoop Show that explores the lives of Geelong players past and present, as well as the off-field figures that are keeping us Geelong strong. My name is Paul James, and today I have the great pleasure to be joined by John Roberts. Welcome aboard, mate.
Thank you very much. I was, like we were just saying, wasn't certain that it was always going to be under these circumstances that we're talking about the season winding down and not our run for the finals, but here we are.
Yeah, a bit like the nature of this show over the course of the last month, where there's been lots of interruptions and weird hiccups along the way that have kind of ensured that this show has spluttered to the finish line. The Cats season has mirrored that perfectly. So maybe I was onto something. Maybe I was the tone setter. It's a real problem. I'll cut up my membership and never sign up again lest I ruin things for Cats supporters in the future. But it's awesome to have you on board. And yes, the circumstances aren't necessarily great if you're a supporter of the Hoops, but there's still plenty of awesome things about you to discuss, and so I'm keen to do so, mate.
I was going to say the only one silver lining for me is that the NFL season and college football season's just about to start. In fact, college starts this weekend, so this is the first time in a really, really long time that I don't have to think about footy and I don't have to think about the Cats and my team through the month of September.
You don't have to juggle.
I can just jump straight into the next sport. Yeah,
it's a nice one, actually, in a sense. I don't want to, obviously, I don't want to see the Cats lose, and they are my number one love in the sporting space. But at the same time, to be able to not have to share that mental bandwidth between multiple codes that are really trying to demand your attention and kind of demand that love is nice, I'm sure.
Do you feel like, have you had time to sit with it now, or the last couple of days? Like, have you been able to reflect yet and sort of, I know that the season's not like officially over. We've still got one more game. But for the most part of you, is it sat with you now?
I mean, with the news coming out that they're putting everyone in for operations and all that sort of stuff, the clubs put the queue in the rack, and obviously we can't actually, there's no mathematical scenario now where we can actually make it. Things might have changed a little bit based on a certain controversial call between Sydney and Adelaide on this past weekend. It might have been a different story, but but we all kind of knew the situation, I guess, going into this last month, that we needed to win 3 out of 4. Really, we've managed to get 1 out of 3 at this point, and so no matter what happened.
Some bad losses over the last sort of few weeks, and throughout the season as well. That one to Freo, I think, particularly stung. It was good that we were able to get up against Port Adelaide, and we were semi-competitive towards the end against Collingwood. I
looked at the Collingwood game. I thought, this is okay, sure, we didn't win, not ideal, but I felt like Collingwood was playing right on top of their game. They've been a little bit off again since, but they got themselves up for us, and we kind of met them and nearly pinched it. And then I thought, okay, well, based on that, then St Kilda and the Dogs won't be a problem. We'll go in, we'll be fine. We'll make the 8, and hopefully we get the troops back a little bit. With Hawkins obviously being on the sidelines at the time, Blitzarves, Guthrie. I thought, okay, the troops could get there, and there's still a few things that need to fall into place.
Yeah,
and a bit of luck required, but at the same time, if you're there, you give yourself a chance, and it just hasn't quite worked out.
Well, we talked about it after the game on Saturday night. I know we're all in sort of semi-emotional state, but it's sort of I'd said it was completely dependent on, I felt, on which version of the Cats we were going to get and which version of the Saints we were going to get. If we were going to get bad Saints that we've seen a couple of times over the last month or so, then I felt like we were in with a real chance. Wasn't to be. We got sort of the best version of the Saints.
Absolutely, probably the best game they played all year. It was the worst concoction for us. So
and that seems to have been common across the year. Think about a game against the Gold Coast Suns. We kind of got the best version of Jack Lukosius brooding for 5 goals for the second time in his career on us, and the loss to the Tigers, Freo. The loss of the Giants now, I think, in hindsight, doesn't seem so bad because they have been really competitive. But
that was the spark for a lot of ways.
Where if you want to be one of those top teams, you can only have 1 or 2 really bad games, and we just sort of started to sort of rake them up over the last sort of month of the season, unfortunately.
Yeah, premiership teams don't have multiple stretches where they're struggling. You might have one, and we could make that argument. Maybe the Pies are in the midst of that right now. There's other teams that have kind of been there. You could, Carlton's obviously surged lately, but when you think about the grand scheme of the entire year, they started strongly. They had a weak patch there for a while that started to extend a little while, and questions began to get asked. Yeah, but then they've had one block that was poor and surged otherwise. But teams, premiership teams don't have mini fits of really bad form, and and we strung too many of those together across different patches of the year. From that Gold Coast period that you referenced to the Giants period, there was a block of 3 games in a row. Like, things just weren't firing all year. And look, there was a lot of luck, there was injuries, there was so many different circumstances that we can kind of point to.
There were babies being born, no shade, but it's fine, but it's not fine.
So it's been a strange year, but I guess as a lifelong Cats fan, I cannot complain too much. We've had, I mean, this premiership felt like it may not have, like the 2022 one, may not have ever come really. We felt that close so many times that you thought, okay, it's never going to quite happen. The list is just, for whatever reason, not quite there. Then they're going to get too old and fall off the cliff. It didn't happen. We got the flag. That's awesome. Had 3 others in the last 20 years or so as well. So it's been a good ride. And
it's funny you say that, because I was thinking about exactly that today, that last year sort of seemed to be like we had to win last year. That was our window. It was, Selwood sort of giving it his last crack, and the team had the young talent that we'd had in years past who sort of had been a problem because of the drop off between our top tier talent and then our sort of younger guys that hadn't been there. That was there last year. And that I felt like that sort of helped propel us to where we needed to get to. And it was just like the window was closing. We've been successful over the last 15 years. It kind of feels like we almost should have won more than we did.
Oh, yeah.
And still might. But it'll be interesting to see what the list managers do to try and string another premiership team together over the off season.
It is certainly one of those things. I mean, if I reflect on the block of what has almost been 20 years since 2004 when the Cats really first popped up again and played in the prelim that year and nearly pinched it from Brisbane too. Obviously, we've won the 4 flags, but then I think about 2008 and we were obviously the most dominant team in the competition that year, and things just didn't go right on the day. 2013, we were that close. They broke, like Hawthorn broke the Kennett curse in the prelim final, and there was a bit of luck going the opposite way where Travis Farko missed what is a shot that he would normally nail any day. Sorry, Travis, I know I bring it up every now and then on the show. I don't hate you for it. You've contributed so much to the club, especially in 2011.
Hey, he shouldn't have done it if he didn't want it.
Well, yeah. So and then obviously there's 2020. There was that the grand final loss there. There was this block of 2016, 17, everything was looking really, really good there. Lots of prelims. So, who knows?
I've got a question for you, and I asked this on my pod as well to my mates, who one's a Hawthorn supporter and the other's a Bombers supporter. Would you rather have 20 years of you'll win 1 premiership, but for the other 19 years you'll be a very uncompetitive side, or would you rather win no premierships but be competitive across that entire 20 years? And as supporters, apparently we're very privileged and we don't answer we don't give the correct answer here, or at least I didn't. But
I would rather win no flags and be competitive every year.
See, I said the same thing. Whereas my mate, who is a Bombers supporter, who is basically living out this exact scenario of winning a premiership and then never again, he said he'd rather have the premiership and then be completely uncompetitive for the 20 years or whatever it is.
It's an interesting perspective. I can get where it comes from, but at the same time, I wonder if I'm trying to think. So, obviously the Bombers, a bit like Collingwood and Carlton, have been sitting on this mountain of premiership trophies over all these years, and so you can kind of go, okay, look, we've had a rough 20 years. We got one, semi. I don't think we can call it recently anymore, but this century. Which is a nice start for them.
Modern game?
Yeah, we'll call it, within this modern game period. They got one there, and we've got this mountain of other flags that we can kind of nestle ourselves on. But then if, with the Bulldogs, for example, if we cast our eyes forward another 10 years and they haven't won another one, would Bulldog supporters say the same thing?
Right. I
suspect they wouldn't, because they don't have this long history of prolonged success. And you could say the same really for Cats fans for a long time, because prior to 2007 it had been 40 plus years.
You're even making me think about the Brisbane Lions right now. They're in this window of they want to win a premiership. Now they might, because we all know how hard it is. The Cats should have won more maybe over the last 15 years. But if they don't come away with any premierships, we're talking about this in 10 years, are they going to be happy with how competitive they were, or would they have wanted one? It's impossible to say. Anyway, it's a fun question.
No, but it's certainly a fascinating one. And obviously Brisbane are kind of the case at the moment, because they've been there or thereabouts for since about 2016, 17, 18 anyway. So, they've almost had a decade where they've been close and not quite
Yeah.
up to this point in time. We're recording this obviously in a vacuum. Who knows what's to
Yeah.
happen down the line? But
Yeah.
they are kind of in that position at the moment, and otherwise it's back to 2001, 2, and 3 before we can
Yeah.
recall the last one.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Anyway,
there are those kind of
what
there's texture.
Yeah.
There's texture to it, and it's certainly a fascinating one. And thankfully, we are in a position where we can sit on. We've got 10 plus premierships, but we've also got quite a few recently, and so
Yeah.
it's a nice position to be in.
Yeah. Apparently, we're nice and privileged, according to my friends.
I would still rather, I guess, on a week to week, feel confident that my team is going to be successful,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't eventuate, than feel down and out and kind of conceding on a week to week.
Those days of ever being like, it was just a miracle to have even won the game. Like, I hated feeling that way. I much prefer to go into the game feeling good, feeling confident, and then you either get the win or you're a little bit upset if you don't.
Yeah, and I've always been one, like I'm part of that kind of sporting culture anyway. I play plenty of sport myself. I also teach and kind of chirp students from time to time when the opportunity comes. So if I find myself in a period where my team is losing all the time, I am just never going to hear the end of it.
Yeah.
I already copped that as a Melbourne Stars fan in the Big Bash, like just chokers. I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like to be a Collingwood supporter. But
I can't say I was because I was asked this as well, and the team I support in the NFL is the Seahawks, who have been always relatively competitive as well.
Yep.
And then in the NBA, I support the Raptors, who won the championship
fairly
not
recently,
too long ago, although they're sort of in a rebuild mode at the moment. But yeah, no, I'm certainly happy with all my sports teams.
Now you've obviously just touched on a few different sports teams that you love there, and so as we kind of cycle things over to you a little bit, where does the love of sport first begin? Before we even get to footy specifically, I guess where does everything begin for you when it comes to the consumption of sport?
Yeah, hard to say. I think probably from my parents. Like my mum used to take us to a lot of footy games when we were young. We used to go see a lot of games at like Victoria Park. My uncle played for Fitzroy back in the 80s. Not too many games. He was a ruckman. But he's still a fierce, Brisbane Lions supporter even today. And then, my dad, same sort of deal. Like, just have always had an interest in footy. So I think that's where it comes from. And then, just growing up with it over the years, started playing. I played soccer. Unfortunately, I couldn't play footy growing up because my parents didn't want me to get injured, which I hate them now. Because then I ended up playing footy in my much later years. So. I'll never get that one back, but yeah.
So how is it that with some Lions heritage there in the family and a little bit of Lion blood in you that you ended up becoming a Cats supporter?
Yeah, right. So my whole family is basically from either born in Geelong, went to Geelong Grammar, or they live sort of somewhere between like Fairhaven, Aries, and like Cumberland Falls or like Moggs Creek sort of area and Lawn.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like my other uncle is next door neighbors with Jeremy Cameron in Freshwater Creek. So my cousins get to go and feed his sheep and other livestock fairly regularly as well.
I mean, did they see the video after the premiership and quickly run out and try and steal a premiership medallion off a cow?
I don't know. I don't know if they're old enough,
missed.
But maybe they did. I should ask them about that.
Opportunity missed. Or did you happen to see a cow the next morning? Did Jeremy pop over and like, I need to find my medal. I think it's around a cow.
How's he doing? So that's where the Geelong side of things comes from. Even though I myself, I've never lived in Geelong or anything like that.
No, it's certainly interesting. It's always fascinating to see where these things come from, especially when I guess we've both got something in common here where we've had family play football, and in your case, you didn't adopt the same team that was, I guess that connection. Whereas myself, my granddad played for the Cats, and that was passed on to my dad and his 6 siblings, and then made its way down to me as well. Me and my two sisters. There was never a second where, I can't speak for my sisters, I guess, but I don't think there was a second where any of us had considered another club, but also potentially even allowed to consider another club.
Yeah, so I think because then my dad's side of the family, they are all Melbourne supporters, I think, for the most part. So the fact that he played with Fitzroy, I think, was the outlier in itself. Like none of us were Fitzroy supporters at the time. I guess until he was playing with them. I do have like a photo of me in a Fitzroy Lions jumper.
Indulging it for a day.
Yeah, back in the 90s when I was like 2 or 3,
when they thought they could sway you and corrupt you, and
didn't work out, did it?
or maybe you stuck with it for a little while, then you saw how the fortunes of that club went and thought, oh, probably can't stick around for this one.
Potentially.
And so I guess, we've touched on other sports as well. And so before we really dive into like all things footy and then all the content side of things that you produce as well, you've referenced basketball, we've referenced NFL. So where do the loves of those sports and any others come into play as well? Because I mean, for anyone watching, it's kind of been partially cropped out, but we can see, I can see, there's Kawhi Leonard sitting in the background.
On the Raptors for that 1 year.
And the other jersey's kind of cut off in the shot there, based on how I've got it.
I can't move my camera.
No, you're right. No, so I won't put that on you. But
no, from the LA Chargers, and that's just because I have him on my fantasy team. No, yeah, anyway.
That's fair.
My wife and my now wife and I, we moved over to Toronto in 2016. Where I just sort of figured, like, if I was going to move to a different country or be on that side of the world, I needed another sport to follow because footy was going to be on at 2, 3 a.m. Hard to watch, even though I was still able to keep up with it.
That's impressive in itself.
Yeah, not always easy, but I just started watching the NFL, was really into that, and then just slowly over time became really, really obsessed with it. And now I'm doing podcasts about it and all kinds of different shows, and it's good fun. And it's what I really love about the fantasy football aspect of these sports is, like, I'm still talking to all my friends back in Toronto every day, and I've been back in Australia for 4 or 5 years now as well. So, like, it's a really nice way to help keep connections and keep friendships alive.
I mean, sport's always been good for that. And when you can add a meta like a fantasy football or fantasy sports style component, that presents a whole host of other opportunities, including a lot of banter that can go with it as well. Did you follow the sports much before you'd actually travelled, or was it really one of those cases? Okay, I'm here, I'm in the environment, I better give these two codes some time.
Yeah, that was pretty much it, to be honest. I didn't watch any NFL or NBA pre 2016 at all. I'd maybe seen like a game or two over the summer, like getting ready to move, but outside of that, no. And even when I got there, I sort of naturally assumed that everyone in Canada would be really into the CFL. I thought that was going to be a really big thing and not too many people would watch NFL, but no, it turns out that absolutely no one there cares about the CFL. It's all NFL, and it's a huge thing. Because the other thing about Toronto is you can basically drive down to Buffalo in about 45 minutes and then you're at a game. So it's still accessible from there as well.
I guess the other part there is also that ice hockey is a pretty big deal over there. Did you jump on that bandwagon as well?
I didn't get to go to any games because for whatever reason, the Leafs games are like $300 just for like a regular season ticket, or at least when I was there trying to find a game, it was. But like you could go to the baseball you could pay $1 and you go to this like Budweiser, sorry, not a sponsor.
No,
like flight deck.
And, as we all lift up our buds to
exactly. The Budweiser flight deck at oh man, I can't even remember what it's called now, like Rogers Field or something like that. And and that was great. You'd be able to like just clock off after work, go to a game in the summer. Yeah, it was a good time. And then NBA as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And similar sort of story for the NBA.
Sorry?
And a similar sort of story for the NBA in terms of your, like how accessible it was for you.
Yeah, and the other thing with when I was there, like the Raptors were becoming very, very good. So the city was really a buzz. Like Toronto's a very, very sports orientated city. Drake's like everywhere. They love Drake, and he was really like flying the flag.
Of course, he's nuts about the Raptors.
Yeah, he's nuts about them. So everyone is excited. It's sort of like even like my wife, who wasn't really into sports at all, started getting into sports, started playing footy. We actually started playing footy over in Toronto because they've got they've basically got the largest AFL football league in the world outside of Australia. So they've got like a 10-team men's league and a 5-team women's league. So it was more accessible. And then we could connect with more Australians as well, which is really great. So anyone who's thinking about it, highly, highly recommend doing that.
That's really, really cool. I certainly had opportunities over the years through my my previous teaching job where we, for whatever reason, I'm not 100% sure why, but we continued to take on a lot of Canadian teachers.
Yeah.
The Canadian teaching scene over there is a very challenging one to get in.
Yeah.
And so a lot would travel. For some reason, they continue to gravitate towards my school. Don't know what that
Yeah,
was.
interesting.
But it was awesome because every year, okay, let's show you the game. And I try to build a little army of Geelong supporters around me. But, eventually they would go home, and hopefully some of them are these days maybe even partaking in some of these local leagues where,
Yeah.
I mean, that all sounds really, really cool. And I'm fascinated to hear that, the Canadian scene is one of the biggest in terms of those outside of Australia, because there's obviously probably other parts of the world, not many, but certainly a few spots around the world where perhaps there's been more Aussies head out to over the years, where they've relocated over the journey. But the Canadian scene's the biggest. That's cool.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah, even in Vancouver as well. But I think because the thing for me, we chose Toronto over Vancouver because, like, I don't know about you, but whenever I go traveling, I go traveling to get away from Australians, not to find more Australians. And I always felt like there was more Australians in Vancouver, and I was sort of like, nah, I want to start like something like really fresh and new. And there's a good bunch in Toronto.
No, I can understand and appreciate that. I don't get away often enough to necessarily have that. Oh, I need to get away from the Australians. It's more, I just need to get away. But I can appreciate the perspective though, even though I haven't been able to quite live it in the same capacity.
Yeah.
And so we've obviously discussed, so the Cats were your team, despite brief moments where you might have had a Fitzroy jumper thrown upon you. I guess growing up with the Cats, and what were some of those first memories of the Cats and successes, failures, etc.?
The thing of it for me, we should hopefully no one clips this, but I have not always been a Geelong Cats supporter.
I've already clipped
it. I should try and throw in some sort of like sound effect where I'm okay. Now no one can clip it at all.
There we go. Nicely done.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know about you, but I've got an older sister, and when I was young, she used to bully the absolute heck out of me. Okay, cool. She shit out of me. I was like, "Is this a parental?"
No, we're all fine.
And I remember when I was like 6, 7, or 8, somewhere around there, I was like, I'm a Geelong supporter as well. We're all Geelong supporters. And I remember she looked at me and she was like, "You can't be a Geelong supporter." And I was devastated. Like, I wasn't allowed to go for this team. And I complained to my dad, and my dad was like, well, I...
Chin up, sport.
Yeah, I used to be a Carlton supporter when I was young, so maybe you could go for Carlton. And I was sort of like, I'm young, so I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. So it was funny, like growing up, I was like supporting quote unquote Carlton, even though like when Geelong went on the run of 3 premierships over like 2007 to 2011, I was like ecstatic for them. I was so happy for them. I found myself always watching Geelong.
Yeah.
When I moved overseas in 2016, I was like, oh, no one knows me. I can be like whoever
start
I
fresh.
want. I can start fresh. No one has like to think I went for Carlton. And that was the moment I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm an adult now. I can go for the team that I want to go for. So I switched to Geelong, or back to Geelong in my mind. When I got back from living overseas, and I saw my sister, I remember like this is within a week of being back. I was telling her I was going to a footy game, and that I'm a Geelong supporter, and I was going to a Geelong game. I think it was like Geelong and Essendon or something like that. And her response was, "Oh my god, that's awesome! I'm so glad you're finally going for Geelong." And I was
sorry.
Like, are you kidding me? I was like so angry because I told her this story about how I didn't go for Geelong purely because she bullied me, and she was devastated. Anyway. She's awesome now. We've made up for it. We're really good friends. But it was like, I've wasted so much of my life. So my memories of going for Geelong are like sort of like behind the curtains, in the shadows. Like
closeted cat supporter.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, enough that it still bubbled to the surface when we had those successful campaigns in 07, 9 and 11.
Yeah.
And so I guess despite the fact that there was this veneer of a Carlton supporter at the time, what are some of those memories of those years?
I got to say most memories, look, this shouldn't probably be like family therapy or anything like that. Some of my other memories are from my dad. Like, I don't know about anyone else, but my dad, no matter what the score, no matter what the result, no matter what the outcome, what the teams or anything, if we went to a game at the MCG, and we're in the fourth quarter, and there was like 10, 15 minutes to go. He was like, right, that's it, we're off. And he would always be removed. Yeah, so he was always like, no pies. He had to like make me like peanut butter sandwiches before the game and bring them. He was always like, got to get out of there, 10 minutes to go to beat the traffic. It's like one of these things that's always stuck with me. Because then on the flip side, like my mum was completely different. She was like, yeah, you got to have a pie at the footy, you got to have a beer, you got to stay to the end. She'd be like one of the last people to leave, and she just wants to like take it all in, successes. So it was like so polarizing. That's like my probably biggest memories are just either being ejected before I've even had a chance to enjoy the game or celebrate, or like or getting lost at like Victoria Park or Cardinia Park.
No, that's quite a contrast at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, but thank you. This has been good. This is very therapeutic.
Well, again, like if we need to clip anything at any point, we can just put the voice on so that no one can really pump it back to the family.
Yes, thank you. No clipping. I probably find a different voice actually. Anyway, so I'm just trying out this new export.
No, I'm all for some fun use of sound effects, so that's okay, all right. Cool. No dramas there.
Cool.
And so obviously you've made this shift to support the Cats formally, properly. What's
funny about doing that as well is because all of my friends here, like I'm really close with all my high school friends. Even because it's like it's unfathomable that anyone would ever in their like later years want to swap teams or change teams. When I came out and said to them that I was a Cats supporter, they're like, yeah, makes sense. And like they'll still hang shit on me all the time and be like even on last weekend, I'm like, oh look, my team, the Carlton Blues, made it into the finals. Like I'm very happy. Like, haha, what a joke. But like, I think everyone deep down knew.
Yeah, it was just always one of those things that at some point you were going to find your way back to the Cats and everything was going to sort itself out.
Exactly.
Which is really novel and kind of adorable in lots of ways. Like it's a kind of cute story that I can you spend a long time walking through the darkness until eventually you found the light that is the Geelong Football Club.
Someone's writing a rom-com about it right now. I mean,
absolutely.
The other thing is like I kind of like fell out of like love with football probably between like 2005 to 2007, 8, sort of around there. Probably because of the state of the Blues, and I was just sort of like, none of this matters.
Wish I was supporting a better team.
They were fairly uncompetitive in that sort of like early 2000s, mid 2000s range.
Yeah, things really didn't start to come good until 2004. There was a blip on the radar in 06 and 15, and until this year, it's just been this long reign of success, which has been awesome. And so once you've kind of made that decision, whilst overseas, you go, no, that's it. I'm a Cat supporter again.
Yeah.
How do you consume the game?
Like, I'm an adult.
Yeah. How do you consume the game at that point? Because again, we've discussed obviously the hours are difficult when it comes to actually interacting with the game from over there. There's kind of catching up on a lot of the goings on, because as much as you were not far from being a Geelong supporter, you went all in, and then also enduring so many close campaigns that never quite worked out through that period.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
I thought it was like, one of the things I actually missed the most when I first moved over there was the start of the AFLW was like just getting going. And I was sort of like, oh man, I would love to have been there. The other thing is like I live in Melbourne's West.
Yep.
So I've always got like a really soft spot for the Doggies, as well as not like maybe like a second team, but then I like to support Brisbane as well as a second team. But like I've always had a really soft spot for them. So when they won the premiership, I was like, of course, the like one that's finally like we moved to the other side of the planet, and now the Dogs have like won a premiership, and the entire Footscray, where like I've spent a lot of time and grown up, is just going nuts. Missed out on that one. So like those kinds of things were like, sad to think about. But I think for the most part, like getting up early, like we would watch the grand final at like 2:30 a.m. We would all go to a pub, because this is the other great thing about joining a footy club overseas is everyone else wants to watch the grand final as well. So we would find like these Australian pubs and bars where they'd be showing it, and just all go as like a group, and we'd be out until sort of like 5 a.m. What it was to be young again and be able to do that.
No, I can totally appreciate it. I mean, I haven't had to engage with the grand final from overseas.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
My dad has been overseas for the bulk of the last decade. In fact, just a little bit more than a decade. And he's been Thailand, China, England, and all of these are operating in different time zones. He's had to get creative at different times to be able to watch the game. even down to last year's grand final. So I can, and I mean 2020, I can imagine it would have been a similar thing with all the lockdowns here, let alone the fact that he was also over in England at the time. Time zones wouldn't have been kind there. So I've kind of, I guess I've always had a little understanding of what it's like to be kind of disconnected through time like that. But
that's how I feel now. Like, because this is the hardest thing in order to enjoy the NFL, and this is why not many Australians do, is because it's on, Sunday night, Monday morning. It starts at 3 a.m. and it goes through till 10 a.m. Like, who's going to be able to watch that? Like, I'm extremely fortunate where I run my own business, so I can, make a decision to take Monday off, or if I want, or
late start, whatever.
Late start or something like that, or I can move like meetings with clients around. So like I'm in an extremely fortunate position there, but I can definitely understand why there's so many people who just can't accommodate that time slot. And that's why like a lot of my friends really love the NBA, because it is accessible. It's mainly on the West Coast. They start it later. It goes every day, so you can watch it on Saturday and Sunday. I think more people should watch the NFL because it is really, really awesome to watch. It's really interesting. I was watching Charlie Pickering on some mates, another pod called Any Given Sunday. Shout out to those guys. Really, really good. And he described it perfectly, I thought, as like, it's like the ultimate chess match between 32 teams, but every chess piece is worth like millions and millions and billions of dollars. And they're all trying to like compete for this one thing. Like, it is such a chess game. It's like, it's so fascinating to watch, like the ups and downs of it.
Yeah, the whole thing's fascinating. That, and even a lot of the European soccer competitions that are in place, like the scale with which, I mean, there's this primitive and raw component, which is the teams going head to head, week to week, but there is this so much deeper than our game, deeper financial component that drives everything.
And
that just ups the stakes so much.
It's missing from, that's one thing I would say is missing from footy is, like as much as, we don't celebrate when players move teams very, very often, unless like it's definitely timed. Whereas in American sports, I feel like that component is really celebrated. Like it's more about like player narratives as much as it is about team narratives. Whereas in Aussie rules, we just sort of solely focus on our club and who's coming in, who's going. We never talk about like player contracts. We never talk about like salary cap. Even Geelong's the worst of this. Like the injury report is just out short term, out mid-term. Like no one ever knows. Whereas a lot of these sort of like talking points really drive the sports in America.
Yeah. No, certainly. I mean, you've touched on like the medical one there. You've touched on a sore spot for a lot of people, I think, within the industry, but even I think even Cats fans as well, where it's one of those infuriating things that the vagaries around that make it really, really hard to.
Like, think about Cam Guthrie this year. When did he injure himself? What was it, like
round 6, I think, was when thereabouts. Yeah, I think he either missed or just played the Sydney game, if I recall.
Yeah, and we had heard it was like a toe injury. Like, okay, cool. So he should be back relatively soon.
A month,
the injury report was like, he'll be back relatively soon. And then it was just sort of like never materialized because they're just not transparent about it at all.
Yeah, I'm quietly hoping that the AFL enforces some sort of policies on the medical side that guarantees that every other club will dictate, okay, this many weeks. And obviously, similar to the Cam Guthrie thing, things can change, circumstances change. And the club did declare, okay, something's gone wrong here. We have to go back to the drawing board, do whatever. But a week by week is so much clearer than medium term, short term. It's just, I don't think it's good enough. But
it's also really hard to. It's hard to find the information as well. Like outside of like AFL.com and maybe Twitter, there's no like if you want to know something about NFL, NBA, if you want to find a stat, there is a stat for everything, and it's accessible. And it's just not the case. Where I just feel like footy's like still like 10, 15 years behind. I think in like 20 years. More people will celebrate when players move clubs or change teams, or I think it'll be more of a centerpiece than it is to just sort of like stick around for the entirety of your career, and maybe you tail off in the last like 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always had a lot of time for players who do that finishes kind of one club players, but there's circumstances still behind it, and you're right in what you're saying that there's some players that like a time comes, and if they pass it up, they kind of wallow at that one club for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But if they take the opportunity, I mean, like I think there's a lot of people, and I think this was an eye-opening moment for me in terms of exactly what you've just been discussing when Stevie J was moved on by the club. Now the club kind of pushed him out the door rather than him jumping, but he didn't want to go. He was going to be one of those players that would have stuck it out to the end. And I'm sure he still would have done a fantastic job for those equivalent years. But what he was able to do for the Giants in that time, like I didn't want to see him gone, but I certainly wasn't going to boo him. I was happy for the guy. He got another opportunity. He did some great things for that club and really paved the road for the team that nearly won a flag.
And then he was up in the coaching booth as well, from there as well. And it even happened this year where the Collingwood supporters were booing Brodie Grundy for playing on the Ds.
And he didn't want to go.
He didn't want. It was up to him. He'd still be at the
Save
park.
it for Ollie Henry. Not that we want to encourage that too much either. But like
Ollie Henry, Jason Horne-Francis, like these players, because the same thing happens in American sports. If they boo them, it's like that'd be so unusual. It'd be so unusual to boo Ollie Henry or Jason Horne-Francis, unless it's like I get that it's like a rivalry.
Well, I don't like it when you're booing kids as well, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's there's another layer to it when it's really young guys like that. But even if Brodie Grundy of his own volition had chosen to leave, we're not there as a sport yet to necessarily celebrate the contributions of a player, regardless of whether they're moving in or out the door.
Yeah. Now, I say this being like I mentioned earlier, Seattle Seahawks fan, and the Seahawks who were booing Russell Wilson last year, week 1, for coming back to Seattle for the first time. There was a lot of booing, but I think that was okay. Just like an example for anyone who knows NFL who's listening to this. Like, I often think about this other player called Ezekiel Elliott. He was a running back for the Dallas Cowboys. When he first went back to Cleveland in Ohio, like he's on they're playing a completely different team because he went to college there, and the Cleveland team at the time was so bad. Like the fans were cheering him when he scored touchdowns, even though he's on the opposing team, because for all he had done through his college career. And I feel like the players in America, they're so used to, growing up in like LA, then going to play college in Michigan, then going to join an NFL team in Miami, and then like finishing their career in Kansas City or whatever. Like they're so used to traveling. Yeah. Whereas in footy, we've got these pathways, right? Like the Geelong Falcon, if you're a Geelong Falcon, you'll more than likely be a Geelong Cat. If you're a Casey Demon, you'll more than likely be a Melbourne Demon. And like Box Hill Hawks have like for Hawthorn, like we've all got these pathways. So it is unusual when,
and with the academies popping up that are tightly aligned as well, like it's really creating these beds for these clubs to feed from. And Geelong's been doing it for years, and we've had the luxury of being the thing that often gets discussed, kind of the rural towns, the catchment is larger, etc. But now all the academies starting to pop up that are feeding into other clubs. I mean, we hear about it all the time with North Melbourne going into this draft, where they've got some, and Gold Coast, where they've got some really high quality players that, if they can position all the pieces right in terms of the off season, they can pick all of them up and bring them all in, and they've already had lots of exposure. They know the club, they know the people, they know the structures, which I think is great in a way, because it potentially gets them off the best possible start. But at the same time, there's so many opportunities missed as well by being kind of not trapped is the wrong word, but stuck in one system. Yeah.
No, I fully agree, and I would love to see sort of like more of a shake-up where the players do it. And like even some of the discourse over the last few months was like Harley Reid. Would he go to North Melbourne? Would he want to, go to West Coast? Jason Horne
saying no, apparently.
To go home straight away. And look, I am fully in support of those campaigns if they want to leave after a year. Like I don't really care. But like I like the idea of players like moving around constantly. The one system players, I just always feel like, oh man, there could be so much more potential for the sport. And
there obviously are some exceptions. A certain club legend that retired as captain last year, winning the premiership for us, is certainly one of those. I guess there's a proof positive component to Joel Selwood that shows like this works. It does. And people will probably lean on those sorts of stories, but there's no reason the other stories can't exist either. Not everyone is a Joel Selwood.
Yep.
With the talent, the leadership, the importance to the club, the community, etc. Like that's not everyone is going to be a Joel Selwood. So that there's kind of that important disclaimer next to it as well. And I mean, other club legends, Gary Ablett. I mean, you touched on kind of the response to from fans and those sort of things and the booing. I must say, I never really recalled there being any booing towards Gary Ablett when he first left for the goal. Like, I was shattered. Like, I'm sure a lot of people were. I don't recall the booing. I obviously recall when he kicked that miraculous goal in his first game against the Cats, that just gigantic rain catcher that sailed through, and people standing up and applauding, because it was amazing. Yeah, but I don't recall any booing just through moment to moment stuff either. I think there was this general respect for what he'd contributed to the club, and I was disappointed but hopeful that we'd see more of that sort of thing going forward, and it's never quite developed across the competition yet.
Yep.
But maybe one day.
Yep.
But I mean, I was talking to a Collingwood supporting friend at work just the other day, and he said, I've got two players that beyond any other I do not want to see succeed. He didn't mention the other player, but he mentioned Ollie Henry. So there is this kind of venom that's there. Now, again, I mean, there's something to be said for the circumstances with Ollie's. Like, I don't for a second buy homesickness when you're moving 45 minutes up the road.
No, of course. He couldn't get a game at Collingwood. They didn't even want him. Mind you, can I just say, like, he's had like a really low-key, like, phenomenal
fantastic first year for the Cats. So.
First year for the Cats, second year in the league. Like, I think that flies under the radar a lot. I think a lot of people just like think about him and assume that he's like sort of more like a 3, 4, or 5 year player.
And yet, so much earlier. So he's been fantastic. As we cycle back in on you, we've touched on lots of really important elements so far. But I mean, you've touched on working, we've touched on podcasts, but we haven't really delved into all of those yet. So there's lots of other facets that make you who you are. Yeah. Let's start with Ball or Nothing. And all of your content. I mean, anyone watching the background, again, we've spoken about the backdrop there. You've got the setup to talk sport there. Yeah. So where did the love of sport become a love of discussing it, and then eventually the creation of a platform to formally do it?
I think so. Definitely over lockdown was a big one where it's like, okay, I still want to be able to talk to my friends and I can't. So I went and bought all this podcasting equipment, and that's where Ball or Nothing. Which, if you like the footy, and I assume you do because you're watching this still, then like I think like that's where that love of just talking about footy, but maybe from like a more sort of like competitive, interesting angle with my mates than it is just sort of like I find a lot of like discourse through the week is just talking about like the tribunal and what's going to happen with like such and such, where it's more like a sort of sit back and approach for like each team. So that is like a lot of fun to do with my friends. If you like NFL, I've been doing more podcasting. I do a show called the Saturday Air Raid, which is mainly focusing on college football players who are like transitioning into the NFL each year. So players who are like on their rookie contracts, which is also a lot of good fun. That comes out on Saturday mornings. And then I've recently just started a sports betting podcast with a friend of mine back in Toronto. Which is, it's weird to talk about here in Australia, where sports betting is obviously not always like seen in a very positive
yeah.
Which I do find ironic, because like you'll see on the news, like when someone wins the lottery, it's like, oh wow, they won the
celebrate
lottery.
That person.
What would you do with that money if you won the lottery? It's like, yeah, sure, we're happy to talk about like people like pissing away $10 a week for years, and 20 whatever it is now, for years and years and years, as they do in like the older generations. But of course, like,
and 99% of them will never win.
Exactly, 99.999% will never win. But like, I want to make some informed decisions about which way I think a game's going to go, and that's frowned upon. But like, I understand it, but also like at the same time, like back in North America, it's very like intertwined in the sports. Like, even if you wanted to watch like some off-season NFL sports, like they talk about like the live betting as the game is going on and how like different lines are moving and stuff like that.
It's baked into the commentary.
It is. So I've recently delved into that, which you can also watch. That's called Prop Nation, which is a bit of fun. Always, gamble responsibly, of course.
Nicely done.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I just think as like these podcasts have grown and grown and grown, what I was going to say is like, this is the first year, I'd say, because I've been making content and videos and animations for a really, really long time. This is like the first year where I've really put myself in front of the camera rather than
Yeah.
being behind the camera as I've always been in the past. And I'm just sort of trying to like embrace that side of things a bit more. And it's been really good. And there's been like a lot of really, really positive reception as well. And I've met some amazing people as well.
No, it's true. Like a lot of the entertainment and consumption around sports is trending in this direction in terms of more community centered stuff and the sorts of shows that you or I might be creating.
Yeah.
That Ben's building with the Hoop Show more broadly.
Yeah.
And like really important, I think that you discuss the different sorts of content, even under this sport umbrella.
Yeah.
And even focused on one specific code. The difference in terms of what you're presenting can be huge because you touch on it yourself. There's so many shows, both the professional media produced stuff that we see on TV and even in the podcast scene or YouTube scene where it is about the news. It's what happened. It's the tribunal. It's this. It's that. It's injuries. And there's so many people that are discussing that. And
it's wide
often,
open in Australia.
Yeah, and often sharing the exact same opinions because there's not like you can't really get too granular. And as you said earlier, there's a lot of information that is not disclosed by clubs.
Yeah.
So no offense to all those people, but it's not necessarily additive to a conversation of any sort.
Yeah.
So it's those who are able to have something different to say.
Yeah.
Whether it's an interview show like this or whatever, where longer form stuff, it's I think about even the written word, the things that would always attract people when it came to newspapers wasn't. I mean, sometimes there'd be a gigantic news story that kind of commanded people's attention, but often it was op-eds, it was larger feature pieces that would catch people's interest, and they'd go and read it. And that approach to consuming media has not changed now. The mode of delivery is different, but what actually engages someone is opinion, it's thought, it's
like interesting
points of difference.
Yeah, and I think because like in Australia, we've grown up with like the Footy Show was always the biggest one, and it was kind of
apparently coming back as tonight's news.
Oh my god, is that true, or was that Sav mega fan up to?
No, I believe Eddie's trying to cook something up, but also did good work, Sav.
Thank you. Yeah, good work today again. But also like the front bar, it's always been like comedy beer is like really baked into it. This is why like I personally really like First Crack after the weekend of sports, because it's sort of like one of the only shows that we've got, or one of the only types of media that you can watch where it's like they talk about like effort, work rate, they talk about like advanced stats, which advanced stats is like it's such a untapped area of our sport. People and a lot of people even on Twitter don't embrace advanced stats. They're sort of like like it's too much for them. So like we've just got such a long way to go. So I like to be able to sort of be able to bridge that and do it in this kind of like format, this kind of medium, like where I can make a minute reel and it can be talking about something that's really interesting and then you can move on.
And obviously the advanced stats one is certainly something that I think, as you say, deserves more attention. As Cats fans, we've obviously got someone who's been a real star of kind of the advanced stat scene this year, being Graham Myers, of course, hitting on the goal assist stat that it's just not something you really heard about. And kind of evidenced by the fact that like we haven't heard about it in years, and then you talk about the previous best being Acker in 2008.
Yeah.
It just doesn't get thought of.
Yeah.
And that's a shame in a lot of ways. And I'm glad that Grind this year, for doing something so spectacular in that space, is being recognised. But there's so many other players who are contributing in these important other aspects of the game that just aren't being recognised because it's not marks, tackles, disposals, goals, whatever it happens to be.
One of my favourite ones to follow this particular season was the talk of like runs of like 6, I think it was 5 or more goals, like basically like teams that had 5 or 6 like runs of 6 or more goals in a game was something like 86% likely to win at that point. Like you can use that information, and again, even from like a live sports betting perspective, you can see that. If you can see that, you can use that to your advantage. But it's interesting to talk about. It's not something that we really touch on too much.
Well, there's a deeply psychological component to the whole thing too, in terms of what does that do for the team who gets on that run. But also, what does it do for the opposition, and why do we lead to this? Sorry, you said 86%, I think was the percentage you mentioned. Like, why do only 14% of teams come back from that?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
as opposed to like some other
and within that, there's probably who are these, like within that 14%, who are these teams? And you might start to notice patterns within it.
Yeah, right.
Like those sorts of stories are fascinating.
some of the other kind of media, and this is not like no shade to anyone else who's making podcasts at all, but it's like the whole like, oh, was it a dangerous tackle? Was it a tackle? Was it not a tackle? Like, it gets so tiresome, it gets so cumbersome. Just
Yeah,
MRO.
there's already again so many people already talking about it. Add a different voice to a different topic. It's huge.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's like some amazing content you're producing, covering lots of different sports and lots of different aspects of sports. And then you've got the other professional side that kind of keeps the beating heart. And as you've mentioned, you work from home, and so that obviously unlocks opportunities for you when it comes to the consumption of sport and production of content. But it's no mean feat what you're achieving in the professional space as well.
Yeah, it's like I'm extremely lucky to have a very, very supportive wife who also runs her own business as well, so she understands. But she's always encouraged. Like, I used to work in advertising for years and years and years, on the content production side of things. And like many people, when COVID first started, I lost my job, and it was sort of like, what am I going to do now? I had to take some time out to think about it. And I had so many friends who had said like, and there's so many days where I'm sitting there, and I don't know about like how familiar you are with the advertising industry, but basically if you want to succeed in the advertising industry, it really helps to be either single or not have any kids, or be really, really young.
So flush for time and energy, right?
Exactly, time and energy. Like, if you can dedicate your life to not even sitting at a desk, but just working from like 8 a.m. through till like midnight, more often than not, then you'll love it. And some people are really driven by that, but eventually, like, as I got older, I was sort of
burns you out.
Can't keep doing this, and then what's my next move? And there's times where you're sitting there, and I honestly have that sort of like, I'm doing all this work for someone else to make a certain amount of money when I could be doing this for myself and work. Like, I work half as much as I used to when I worked in the industry, and I get paid way more than I did. So like, I mean, I'm more than happy, and it works for me. There are, like, the downside, of course, is that there's months where it's like, oh crap, I don't even know what I'm going to be working on next week or next month. So you have to go out and find more work. But if you build up like really great relationships over time, that's not a problem. And I think that I was lucky to do that. I had a lot of friends who supported me in getting started 3 years ago, and now it's going like really, really well. And I'm sort of like moving to this next phase where I'm doing more like content for myself, but also like content in this format for other people. So like way more video and podcasting and conversational content.
Yeah,
as
the skill
opposed to just
sets.
sort of like churning out photography and posting on Instagram.
Yeah, that's fair. Certainly the skill sets that you're developing on the content production side are certainly going to help fit. Like, these things can work hand in hand, and I think that's a huge aspect as well. And I guess how do you foresee trying to integrate those two components more in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, it's like some people have said to me, like, it's like cutting hair or something. Like, no one's ever not going to need content. And even in like this year where AI started to really take off, and everyone's like, oh no, it's going to take our jobs. It's going to take our jobs. It's like, it's actually there to make your life way easier. And my business had reached the point this year where I thought I was going to have to start hiring people or contracting people to help me. And then I started researching AI, and it saved me so much time that I could actually like put back into my business to find more work to be doing for people. And so I find that, like, the plan for the rest of the year, really, it's just to keep producing as much as possible. Just trying to like sort of network and connect with people, whether that's on Twitter. I got to say, like, I'm trying to sort of move more to like visual, like Instagram and TikTok.
Yep.
Is a big one for me at the moment as well. Which, listen to us now, me be like, TikTok now. But
don't worry, it's only been recent, with even on the game side, that we've just started putting a few shorts and those sorts of things up, and I'm going, oh, I feel so out of place. But
I know I've got sisters who are like calling me, and I'm like, hey, what do I need to jump on now? No, but
finger to the pulse and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And I find YouTube as well. I'm just doing so much YouTube content at the moment as well, and just like, the thing is, and I was saying this to some of my co-hosts as well, is like, it's like, it's a hobby until you can start getting like sponsorship or anything like that, and then it's not, and then you can treat it like a proper business. And luckily, like, I'm already doing that, so I can just sort of tack it on to like a business expense if I need to. But like, it's really as much of it's what you want to make of it. Like, and this is the thing you kind of have to think about when you're either working in advertising or you're working with clients or you're running your own business, is like, someone has to do this. And often, if like, if I buy this nice microphone, I've got this nice camera that I have anyway, and I've got this setup, people are like, yeah, that's John, he does that thing. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, I went to uni and did radio broadcasting, so that helps. but also like in this capacity,
Having the skill set's handy.
having the skill set's handy, but also just having the like just applying yourself and having the technology, having the drive and the motivation and saying like, yeah, I'm all in. This is what I'm going to do. And this is the great thing about my wife and I is we have these things that we just say like, I'm all in on this idea and this is what we're going to do. And yeah.
And certainly, like, on top of all that, there's having the willingness to, and I think it's part of the all-in approach anyway, but it's having the willingness to stop, assess the scene, read, learn, be willing to take on all this information to then make another informed decision that, again, might be another all-in decision that you throw all the chips in on. But there can be some where they get so invested, they get so deep, and they're just charging at a goal that they don't realize that the target has actually moved in the meantime.
Yeah.
And this is where, we talk about the putting the finger on the pulse when it comes to social media platforms, whatever it happens to be. You can't expect, what might work on an Instagram as a reel is not necessarily going to translate to what TikTok looks for, or what the audience, on TikTok is looking for, or YouTube Shorts, or whatever it might happen to be. All of these things are they're different audiences looking for different things, different modes of delivery. I mean, we talk about, short-related stuff. Well, YouTube caps it at 60 seconds.
Yeah.
But
that's
not the case elsewhere. And so there's these little tweaks in terms of what you're trying to deliver, how you're trying to deliver it, how much of it is you on the screen versus what you're trying to discuss. And maybe you've got more, like, especially in the sporting context, maybe you're clipping out more footage for it. If it's a video game, maybe, there's more of the game that's on the show. Sorry, bringing in some of my areas of expertise there. But this all looks different, and you've got to be able to, as a creator of content, got to be able to kind of assess what works in these different landscapes.
It's funny you say that, like, on YouTube, I find like if you make like a really provocative headline, like something that might upset people, like those videos get so many views. But the same thing doesn't apply on TikTok because they're not really necessarily looking at the headline. So they just want the first like 3 seconds of the video to be insanely compelling for them to stick around. Same thing on Instagram. Like, you might know the person, so you're more likely to subscribe. And that's another thing that I want to try and sort of start to move more into is like subscription-based content. And it's not like, oh, I think people are going to love me and going to want to hear me talk. But like, if I can provide, particularly in like a sports betting perspective, if I can provide like my stats and models and spreadsheets to people and give my opinions, then that might be something that someone might be interested in, as opposed to.
So you're talking about things, like Patreon sort of models and those sorts of things, not necessarily Patreon, but those sorts of models.
Yeah, Patreon, even like the things that you see on Twitter now with like the
subscriptions there. Yeah, true.
I don't know. Are we calling it X now? Do I have to do that?
I haven't embraced it personally myself, but I can appreciate anyone who does, because we are in Elon's. This is the dark timeline that Elon has created.
Exactly. So we'll see how it goes. Like, who knows? And like I was saying, it's like I think you have to really back yourself to want to be like, people will want to listen to me. It's like you kind of need that sort of sense of confidence, or you could sort of like treat it like what we probably did when we were starting it out, and it's more of like it's not like Dear Diary necessarily, but you're sort of like, here are my thoughts and I'm going to record them and transcribe them, and then people can participate in that conversation that way.
Oh, look, every single one of us who creates some sort of content on the internet, if you've gone back and looked at your stuff, you've realized, holy shit, I've come a long way.
Yeah.
A lot has had to change, because there's always a raw component there that needs, it's a gem that just needs to be polished and shaped, and we all get there at different rates, and
and
find your audience.
My advice to anyone who wants to get into it as well is like, you might have that sort of like self-doubt or imposter syndrome of like, oh, no one would want to listen to me anyway. But like, no, people do. People are on the train going to work. They want something to watch in the morning, and they want something like quick and fast. And there's no reason it couldn't be you.
But just identify what that thing is within you, and what can you say, what can you add to a conversation, rather than what can you regurgitate, which is a whole other thing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's been a really fascinating chat, and as we've kind of touched on, there's all these external elements that kind of help keep things ticking. I mean, we were talking before the call started that parenthood and those sort of things, they're all variables in the mix as well. So many different plates you're spinning. So let's, as we wind things down, especially trying to be respectful of the parenthood situation, as we wind things down, we'll hone in on the cats a little bit again.
Yes.
Your complete immersion has fluctuated over the years for a variety of different reasons that we've already discussed. But in your eyes, who's the greatest cat of all time?
Oh wow, didn't see this coming. So the greatest of all time?
In your eyes, and that can of course vary. I mean, I've kind
Yeah,
of phrased this sometimes as like the best cat, and so that's
yeah.
some
I was
people
gonna
might look
say,
at that through a skill lens, others might look at that as a leadership lens, which kind of steers
yeah.
people in different directions. So it's still very open.
Hmm. So because I noticed, yeah, you haven't asked me who's my favorite cat of all time. It's who is the
Well, we
greatest.
can lean into that next if you like.
It's got to be somewhere between like Gary Ablett Jr. and Joel Selwood, but maybe that's recency bias.
I mean, it could be,
It
but
could be.
it's. I mean, for all of us in all walks, we can really only comment on what we've been able
Yeah,
to consume properly. So,
am I remiss for not saying like Jimmy Bartell, Corey
oh, but
Enright,
yes,
Matthew
Jimmy Bartell
Carter,
is
like,
absolutely the best cat. But
yeah.
sorry, I just let my favorite player slip out. But no, I mean
on
it's
those 5 players.
it's certainly one of those vacuums. Like all the people that can sit there and talk about Gary Ablett Senior in his heyday or Polly
Yeah.
Farmer or whatever. Like we don't necessarily have that luxury. I certainly I caught the tail end of Gary Ablett Senior.
Yeah, but also the Cats were mediocre for a really long time.
Yeah.
It's the reality as good as they were.
It's one of those things. I guess this. I mean, we've touched on the favorite cat part of it. So who's the favorite then?
My favorite,
Past or present?
Yeah, past or present. Gee, I want to say Jimmy Bartell, but the stuff that he does
Absolute
with
cat.
Eddie McGuire these days is like, it's really off-putting.
I actually haven't really consumed too much
No,
of it.
I
Is it?
haven't either, but he's still doing it.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe like even more modern day. Like I really love Mitch Duncan. I wouldn't say he's my favorite, but like I don't know. Maybe even on the team right now, he'd be up there. At what point are we going to start talking about Tom Hawkins as like in the one of the greatest? Because he's starting to break some records.
He deserves to be, and
Yeah.
based on the fact that they are putting him in for operations and whatnot for
Yeah, he's gonna be
postseason,
back.
clearly he's not retiring like Jack. I thought that was pretty obvious actually when they had the little photo when Jack and Tom had that photo earlier in the season,
Jared
but
Scott, yeah.
that it was clear Jack was retiring and Tom wasn't. But even if people only had to read what was written on the jumpers to work that out, but whatever, speculation built. Yeah. Tom absolutely belongs there with the goal output, with the number of goals he's given away. Like, I can't help but wonder if you were to add, and I know it's a very simplistic approach to it, but if you were to add goal assists and goals kicked, he'd far outstrip Gary Ablett Senior in terms of the goals kicked.
Yeah.
The goals tally, I guess overall, he's come through in this unselfish Cats era that has been super successful. He's kicked.
Yeah.
He's going to get close to 900 by the time all said and done. It's an incredible effort.
I think so. I think like we're reaching this period where it's like we might need to start talking about him before we sort of move into the next phase of the Geelong Cats. And also he was able to overcome when he first came into the league, there was all that like pretty boy narrative. He's never going to be anything because he's too beautiful or something like that. I can't remember.
But also there was like the Tony Lockett comparisons and how can he ever compare and that sort of thing. Like,
yeah,
I get it. Like, but the game's also very different. And he was just a big, thick-set kid coming into the comp, and so people tried to draw comparisons. He was up against it from straight out the gate. He was also meant to be pick 1, but because of the way the father-son still worked back in the day, Geelong got him for nothing, basically. The system was very different, but it also kind of, I guess, fostered some less than positive conversation early on, and then he worked out his kicking technique and exploded in a grand final.
Yeah.
So, and we'll ignore the post that he hit in 2009 against St Kilda. Hitting goal posts is a fickle topic right now, so we'll
yeah. But also that's top of mind because weren't the Saints fans like booing him on the weekend?
Were they?
I had heard that there was some chatter that they had been booing him potentially for something that happened 15 years.
Yeah, nearly 15 years ago now. Well, that's I guess they've got nothing to cheer about at this point, so why not?
They starting. They're starting.
Who knows? They might get up there. Your previous answers might kind of, I guess, steer me towards what I think will be your answer for this one. But you're building a team. Schoolyard pick. You've got Gary Ablett Jr. and Gary Ablett Senior standing in front of you. Which way are you going to go?
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to go Gary Ablett Jr. by I would say by like not fairly wide, but I'd say by a little bit.
That's fair.
It,
Talk me through the rationale, though.
yeah, my rationale is oh man, I don't want to offend. I don't want to upset people.
Don't worry, I don't think Gary Ablett Senior is going to be tuning in and
oh yeah,
going to get too aggrieved by this.
No, it's okay. We're at the point in the show where we can get hot takey.
Oh yeah, that's very true. We've cracked an hour.
Yeah, Senior, like, you know, he was very good at the system that he was sort of like grew up in, which was being a full forward and kicking goals, and that was what he was really good at. Gary Ablett Jr. was good at like pretty much everything, like kicking goals from the pocket, kicking goals from an angle, being a midfielder, being a leader, all kinds of different angles. And that's why I kind of feel like it's not that close.
No, that's fair. He brings more to the table.
Yeah, he was way more of like a Swiss Army knife, could just like do it all type person.
No, that's fair. I can totally appreciate that look at it. We've touched on your current favourite player. So I guess from the Cats, this next generation, it's going to be in the conversation a lot more over the coming weeks and months because of, I mean, we've seen some retirees already. We've got Isaac Smith. We've got Jonathan Segler earlier today as we record.
Yeah.
There's and potentially more heading out the door.
Maybe, but I don't know.
Well, if not this year, certainly in the next couple of years, because obviously, I mean, that old group that everyone's been talking about for years, it's got to happen at some stage.
Of course, yeah.
Which means that there's a new crop that's going to come through, and it is starting to come through. We've obviously seen the likes of Ollie Henry, we've discussed him, there's Tanner Bruin, etc. Who from that next generation that perhaps hasn't necessarily popped their head through just yet is kind of the one that you're watching the closest? Anyone that you really got a good feeling about that perhaps hasn't gotten the game time yet? Which maybe takes Ollie and Tanner, for example, off the table for you. But
yeah, okay. So because I was going to say like we already touched on it earlier in the show, but what Ollie Henry was doing in his second year was pretty amazing. So that was really good to see. I'm trying to even think like on the defensive side of things, like.
And I'm not saying they have cannot have played a game yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Ollie's getting close enough to game 50 at this point, and Tanner will be in the ballpark too. So they've kind of got a few runs on the board at this point.
Yeah, look, I'm not completely privy to my VFL playings as well. So I think from the younger side of stuff, yeah, like it's hard to say. Like Tanner Bruin definitely had some really good games this season.
Yep.
Definitely had some not so good games as well. So that'd be tough to see. Like Brad, whereas like you compare that with Brad Close, who it felt like him from like game one just was like shot out of a cannon and never looked back. And I think that we're very fortunate to have those players come in. We've also got like a really good recruiting,
Wells and Mackie.
recruitment, staff. So it's hard to say. I feel like the young talent will always have the like support around them that they need to succeed.
I'll considering that you've been careful with your wording there, I'm going to consider that another vote behind Mitch Nevitt on my to support my campaign there. So
I'll tell you, definitely
not. And I guess we record this knowing that the Cats are not going to play in the finals for 2023. Right. It's an unfortunate reality, but it is the state that we're in. So 2024.
Yeah.
What's your feeling? What needs to happen for the Cats to be back up at the pointy end? Can we do that?
Yeah,
in the next 12 months.
I definitely think we'll be back. Like we've already talked about, this is the second time in 15 years that they've not made the finals. It's a really weird set of circumstances. The whole year was just weird. It felt weird, and it never sort of like that eeriness never really went away. If you were to say like what have been the worst two seasons for the club over the last 15 years, you'd say both those two times that we didn't make the final,
2015 and 2023. Yeah,
exactly. And I think we'll be right back there. I think we'll probably recruit the right players that we need. And that drop off that we had in a lot of like, I don't know about you, like I just felt like there was so many like skill issues, even just something as basic as skill issues, which has never been a problem for the Cats. Was a massive like sore thumb this season. So yeah, I've got no doubt. The only reason they wouldn't is because there's 8 better teams than them. Currently, yeah.
In the vacuum of 2023.
Yeah, and like, look, we got beat by some really young, awesome, talented guys. So hopefully that doesn't continue, but I think there's definitely space for us. Yeah.
I mean, obviously you've spoken about the off-season and what we might need to go out and get. Is there a particular portion of the ground that you feel like needs that little bit of extra TLC going into the 2024 season?
Yeah, I know a lot of people talking about like tall people at the moment, but for me, it's just defense, man. Like defenses win premierships as far as I'm concerned, and staying healthy as well. And like when you've got someone as talented as Tom Stewart back there, and Sam DeKoenig's on his way up, like they can't do it all themselves. They need the
Yeah.
support. So I'd be looking to the defense. Like our offense has been awesome for a long time, but we gave up so many 100+ point games this season. Even like 93 points to the Eagles. Like I don't have it in front of me, but there was
but there were some games where we might have won by a lot, but it wasn't flattering on the defensive end. Right. It's just that we pounded them a little bit on the offensive side.
Bombers, but they still put up like 108 or something points, something like that. Yeah. So, and I'm talking about the first time around, not the second time. Yeah. So I'd go defense.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, it's been fantastic to have you on board for the show, John. Really appreciated the time that you've given, and it's been awesome to pick your brain about a whole host of different things on field and off. If people want to check out...
What's been really nice is being able to talk positively about the Cats, because on my podcast, because my mates are Hawks supporters and Bombers supporters...
they're just poking at the moment.
The only time I've ever been able to talk nice about the Cats is round 1, 2, and 3 of this season, because they were doing so bad. So this is nice. This is nice.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad I was able to provide that platform for you. And so we've touched on all of the content already and social media. If people want to check out all of the things that you're doing, where should people go?
Okay, so you can follow me on Twitter at John Lloyd Roberts. You can follow me on Instagram at Finn. That's FYN. I also have at Finn on Instagram, on Twitter as well, but I don't really use it as much there in that capacity. If you like NFL, if you want to learn more about it or get into it, always talk to me. I love talking about it. I'm doing like a series at the moment of comparing footy teams to NFL teams. Like if you want to watch this season, which team would be suited best for you to come in and look at. So you can listen to my show, The Saturday Air Raid. That's on the NFL Lab Network. And I also, if you want to indulge in any betting, I do a Prop Nation show with my friends in Canada as well, which is also taking off. And I think that's the laundry list of places where you can find me.
So obviously our audience here are Cats fans. If you're a Cats fan and you're talking about aligning Cats fans with NFL teams, who? Because I don't follow NFL at all. To be honest, who should be my team then, based purely on this kind of transferable logic?
Yeah. So for me, it is either the Seattle Seahawks, greatest team in the world as well, because we similarly have had much sustained success. Have got a really strong integrated coaching staff. Basically, every player who comes into the system is like a fantastic player. Or the Baltimore Ravens as well, if you want to go to a different conference. I would say the Baltimore Ravens, similarly built as well. Lots of top-end talent, built to succeed.
Look, I've got to be careful if I choose to jump on the Seahawks bandwagon. I've got to make sure I'm calling them Seahawks. I can't, say up the Hawks.
Up the Hawks. I know it's weird.
That'll sting a little too much. I don't think I can quite go there.
They do have the same colors as us, the Seahawks.
Okay, well there's another. Okay, I think you're winning me over here. I think I could climb on that bandwagon. But I guess everyone listening, Cats fans, make sure to go check out all of the content and make your own decision. You might also be a Seahawks fan as well. John, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cats fans, Hoop Show fans, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the Hoop Show on YouTube. Subscribe to Behind the Play on podcast feeds everywhere so that you're up to date with all future episodes. Ben and I are already planning a whole range of different things for this off-season period that is starting a little bit sooner than we perhaps intended or expected with the way the Cats season has wrapped up. But there's going to be some awesome stuff there, so make sure to check all of that out. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Remain Geelong strong, and I'll see you next time.